Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday, June 12th, 2024 regular board meeting of the Paradise Recreation and Park District. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? At this time, I'd like to welcome our board chair who will take over.
Dr. Alma Green,
Present.
Director Mary Belfay,
Here.
Secretary Sue Rodwick,
Here.
Jen Goodlin is excused, and Robert Anderson, Vice Chairperson Robert Anderson.
Here. I'd like to welcome everyone. Going to start off with the public hearing on the final budget. Dan?
Yeah, so in the agenda, there's a public hearing process, lays out staff report, open hearing to the public, 3 minutes maximum per speaker. The chair will then close the hearing to the public. There'll be a board discussion, a motion and a vote. We do lay out a couple of the actions on here on the suggested action, but what I'm going to refer to starts on page 3 of the report, of the packet, and that's our narrative. So the last few years, we've been doing a narrative to go along with the budget. Really, the action tonight isn't to adopt the narrative, it's to adopt the budget. So the tables and the resolutions and the other associated items. But it's been very helpful, I think, for us to share with the public and for board members to keep track of what changes there are. So I'm going to touch on some of these. This has been reviewed really extensively with our finance committee. And it's been a pretty involved process. In comparison to the last couple of years, where we've had a lot of challenges with numbers coming in and a lot of uncertainty, we've been able to keep much better on track with the schedule this year. So first part of the budget kind of lays out some of the process, and starting on page 6 is our calendar. I will note one thing about the narrative. This is a draft. We certainly there are a couple of changes I've caught in there that we need to remedy. One of the major changes that we'll do before it comes a final product is we'll update the actual numbers based on the end of year. So it'll be as of June 30th. So there's a few changes in there. You'll notice that all the tables in here are from April 30th is the actual date. And if you want to refer to our real numbers right now, that's in the district report, which has May 31st numbers. I'll touch on one of the big items in there is we did get our payment about $500,000 from the county. So our tax revenue, that's one of the most significant changes. It swung that from that deficit cut it in half, essentially, from what we had in there. So even with all the expenses of the month. So that's a bit of good news on that. There's a lot of details in here, and this has been available before, but I just want to kind of jump to a couple of highlights that I have in here and can certainly take questions. One item that's been a good benchmark for us, like many agencies, the big expense is staff. And so there's kind of a benchmark that's been out there about 70%. One of Mary's favorite numbers there, 70% roughly on staff. And that was our case pre-fire. Now we're down in the 60s, but still kind of holding proportion over the last few years. So that's keeping some containment on that. Even with some major challenges, and I'm on page 9, by the way, if you're kind of keeping up here. we have only dug into reserves by less than 1% or by 1%, 1.2%. One really significant thing that's going to happen in the next few years may not happen this next fiscal year, but will be as we get grant revenue and reimbursement from insurance, that potentially could go. I think this is a question one of the board members had, could go back to our reserves. So there's an opportunity there. I suspect it won't happen this next fiscal year, but over time we'll be able to kind of catch back up and replenish some of those reserves that are related to expenses with insurance rebuild or grants. Couple of things here. Now I'm jumping all the way over to page 10. Some changes from the preliminary budget. One of the major ones, this is item F, if you're looking at that. Actually, I'm going to jump up one paragraph there to E. A couple of things that are different on this budget cycle is we have added a projection for next fiscal year. We did explore, and this was something that was recommended in the last couple of years, the idea of a multiple year budget. Some agencies do that. They'll have one budget they adopt for a 2-year cycle. We just thought that given the uncertainties that we've experienced, those are lessened now, but that we still wanted to kind of, I think, fine tune this on an annual basis. And yet we still want to look forward. And I think as we get more practice at it, that's going to give us an ability to anticipate, are we going to have changes to impact fees that go over time, or you have changes to our schedule and fees that turn into income? Do we have some projections on grants that are going to be reimbursed and closed out in the next fiscal year? And that's going to give us a 10%, payment over that whole grant. So I think it gives us a chance to kind of practice that a little bit to look forward, and then to come back next year and really fine tune it. But I just want to point out that's something that is in there. And it's non-binding, but it just gives us a chance to kind of look at it as we go into the future. We say in here, the return of the appropriations for contingencies. We had listed out contingencies in the past as an item, but it now shows up on the tables. So you'll see it's a 10% of the total budget. And it's kind of there, and I think more articulated that if there's any changes to the budget, we have our set aside funds for contingency on there, and it's 10% of the budget, so it's pretty substantial. We also have, and we'll have this every year. What's that? Oh yes, Mary.
I just have one thing that I didn't include, but back on page 8 of the packet and page 4 of the report, on item number 3, I think that repair and maintenance account number is 5360 and not 5260.
Okay.
5260 is
you.
repairs and or subscriptions and dues. That's all.
Yeah, and by the way, if there's any corrections you guys have, I know one board member had suggested after giving me some that information, be happy to take a look at it, see how we can fix things in here. Okay, so just some changes from the preliminary budget that we adopted last month. So workers' comp, increased that. Merchant and bankers fees increased by 1,000, not too much. Dues, memberships and subscriptions and publications, increasing that by 5K. And by the way, what that involves, there's been a fundamental shift in what people used to call software, and we had in a computer category. Now they've all gone to a lot of subscription models, and so that's where we code it. So if we have Microsoft packages, if we have Adobe, if we have the DocuSign, all of those are now subscriptions rather than kind of a off-the-shelf one-time purchase. So that's one of the items that over the years has really increased over time.
I have a question on
Yes.
that, Dan. So I understand that explanation. So that, can you point out that that $5,000 increase, that's an increase of 5,000 above what was in the preliminary budget?
Correct.
The preliminary budget, if I recall correctly, I think it had a $35,000 amount.
Yeah.
So that, but this increase would go to 40,000. Is that?
Yeah.
correct?
Let me take a look just to make sure. Yeah, it's looks like the proposed is 40K.
40,000.
Yeah.
So
And
what-
I'm just providing the deltas because we had that preliminary and all the other things that have been reviewed at the finance committee.
right. And that's something we didn't really discuss in detail, line item by line item, but I'm just curious, when you look at that particular line item and then the one right below it is the line item for staff training and that type of thing. And you've heard me say this as a board member, I like to see us increase that each fiscal year so we can really encourage staff to continue on their improving their skills and that type of thing. And it doesn't seem like there's much of a change in that line item.
No, it actually has gone down,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you the reason why. I'm also a big proponent on our staff. Being well trained. That's one of the perks of the position is we try and give people that professional development and then help them do good work. Our staff has been exceedingly diligent on either trying to find scholarships or free trainings, and so that's reduced some of that. Actually, some of the bigger costs we have on the training is associated with lodging if it's an in-person training. So that item has been preserved. But looking at we have a challenging budget. The cycle with going into reserves. So we want to make sure that we kind of we're diligent on looking at the costs and all that. That might be something we increase next year, but seems adequate for right now.
Well, let's assume that we adopt it the way it is. Why not we just monitor the situation throughout the coming fiscal year? And if things prove even more beneficial, then we could make an adjustment during the course of that year, could we not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the idea too on having that contingency set aside, it gives us some ability, some flexibility there. But, I think we wanted to be very judicious on,
Right.
dipping into any reserves, which,
Okay.
we've been very conservative on our budgets.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a comment on the 5260, the dues, membership and subscriptions. You took it up to 40,000. We only spent 3,200 this fiscal year so far. So what, $27,000 is the difference from what we actually spent than what we budgeted for? The budget was 30,000 and so far we've spent $3,192. And now you're going to up it to 40.
On mine, I have 32,000 we've spent.
What page are you looking
I'm
at?
reading it the wrong column. Never mind. Thank
Okay.
you. My apologies.
Sure. Yeah. And in fact, if folks want to look at the kind of more up to date on the budget versus actual, that's on page 78. So just continuing a couple of other things, recommendations, a master plan is going to be critical for us. It may be in this, not this next fiscal year, maybe the following one, but one of the things that we wanted to do differently this time than what we've done in the past is some things that I think tie in with our financial side of it quite a bit, but doing an inventory of our existing site facilities and coming up with a repair and maintenance schedule based on that. That'll help us plan out some repairs in the future. We're going to have, that's underway right now, been some preliminary information to the finance committee, but looking at our fee schedules. And then we are underway right now with a consultant on our impact fee nexus study. So those are some, significant things coming up, I think, in the next fiscal year or the following.
When will the nexus study isn't finished, right?
No, it's going to go through a pretty rigorous process, going to committee and all that. Our last one, I think it was 2016.
Right.
And so that's what set our fees right now. So this is happening. We've had a couple of meetings and interviews and information and shared updated information on district facilities and so forth with the consultant. So,
Okay, so on page that you just were reading, complete the impact fee nexus study. Says it's not complete, and then on page, let me get it.
21.
Is that it? Where it says, it refers to a comment about and it made it so, page, 21 of the agreement of the report. It says the fees stem from a formula developed during the Nexus study. So that makes it sound like the Nexus study is finished, or that's just part of where they're doing right, where they're going right now.
You know, it's kind of like long live the king. The king is dead, long live the king. So the previous Nexus study was 2016.
Right.
It was completed. That's what sets our fees. So
Right.
the new one will supersede it, but we still have fees that are set by a Nexus study that was completed in 2016.
So this refers to the 2016 Nexus.
Yeah, right,
study.
right. Yeah.
You both lost me on page 21 or 20. What text were
Page
you?
21 of the report, page 25 of the packet. The
Oh,
very
5 of the packet. Thank you.
second to
You didn't
last
say that initially. Okay.
page or sentence.
So,
Okay.
and I'm going to go just kind of linearly through a couple more items on the document here. But table 4 is pretty significant. Actually, the next set of tables 4 and 5, because it lays out basically that's our adopted budget with the projected for the next year, and that is not binding. That is just kind of informational. But we are going to go into reserves, projecting going into reserves. If you look on page 11 of the report and 15 of the packet, what I think is helpful to look at is that, you know, I think that's jolting, right, to look at a negative 210. But we do have reserve funds, and we're mentioning that allocation. If you look down at the next table, table 5, and it says current operations, and has a $6 million in that proposed beginning balance. And it shows the expenditures of 210,500, and that would go to pay for that. That's basically our rainy day fund, essentially, which is,
Right.
you know, we're still going to go through. I think the next 3 or 4 years have budgets that look like this, for sure. But you know, I think each year we've, for the most part, over the last 6 years, have had some quote unquote pleasant surprises as far as our budgeting and coming out ahead on it. But there's still a ways to go. So I just want to be upfront about that. One thing that I think is really important to look at too on that. Oh, I'm going to jump ahead here. By the way, if you want to update, and we'll have an updated number on it. On the next page here has the the bottom line number as of May 31st, instead of negative 530,000, it is a negative 251. So it's quite a bit reduced with the amount that we got from the county on our tax revenue. And we should get some more at the end of the year as well. I want to jump over to the funds section. So this is page 24 of the report of the packet, page 20 of the report. One significant change is we have a fund that's called accumulated capital outlays. So that's allowed for special districts to set up a fund. Typically, it's past funds that have had some accumulation of budget savings, of other items, other revenue that comes in, and it's set aside for future expenses on capital projects. Well, over the next few years, we're going to have some major capital projects. So we are utilizing those funds and that accumulated capital outlay to devote it to these projects. So that's going to swing that around from, we're going to pull $550K from that And that's going to reduce that fund amount to $56,700. Other reserves you'll see are unchanged. One thing I wanted to point out too, and now I'm jumping ahead here to page 22 of the report, 26 in your packet. Last year we did a fund payment to our CalPERS liability. And so it has a couple of advantages. One, it helps reduce our future liability that might come out because we prepay it. There's it's an interest-bearing account. Once it goes over there on our books, it kind of looks like it's an expense. So that 180K isn't a fund that we control. It gets moved over to kind of a CalPERS payment. Where it shows up on our balance sheet is it reduces our CalPERS liability. So that's a positive thing there, but that you may look at that and go like, where did that 180K go? Well, it went to CalPERS to pay down that liability, and that is accumulating interest and so forth. So that will help us in the future. We did a few items we shuffled to balance out with our current needs from operations, future operations, capital projects, and so forth. But I wanted to point out on page 27 now, 23 of the report, designated treasury funds. So we had a whole, if you remember from years past, a whole bunch of those. And some of those had very small dollar amounts, like double-digit dollar amounts in there. We've now compressed those, combined those into some more easily understandable accounts. So we have scholarships, for example, rather than we had quite a few different ones. And so that's going to be a practice we do from here on, is have kind of a set basket for donations for certain things, rather than it was a practice of the district. Every time we got a check, it would set up a separate fund for it. And that's just not it'd still stay on the books, even though the amount might be expended. So I just want to point that out. The following rest of it, and by the way, it got cut off on our packet, but I think the separate PDF online, when this is revised, we'll be able to landscape those pages. So it'll be and it's viewable on the electronic version. Just happened to get cut off here. Goes through our staffing levels, our org chart, and a salary scale. The rest of the material here, we have our resolutions, and that's going to be one of the board actions tonight on the hearing will be and they match up with it. But this first item is the resolution matches with that action item number 1 on adopting the budget and has supporting information in the balances on the funds. And the second one is looking at our reserves and revised capital outlay formulation. So that kind of lays out our funds on it. There's other items on tonight's agenda that's related to this. Notably, we'll have a salary scale and an appropriation limit resolution. That's something that's required from the state each year. And that's something we give to the county. It's a very kind of routine resolution there, but that's item 7.2, and 7.1 is the employee salary scale. Happy to answer any questions. Try to anyway.
We'll have board discussion after the public as their input. So I think we can probably address that at that time.
Sounds good.
Do we have any public comment on?
I apologize. Oops. I apologize if some of my questions were answered while I was on the road. I wanted to ask about the staffing full-time equivalents because it mentioned the 2021 and the projected 2022, 2023. So as regards the $2,080,000 were budgeted for this fiscal year for wages, and that's not going to get spent. And then we're anticipating 2.2 million next year. Just wondering how many staff members we've actually had this year and how many we're anticipated to have next year, because that was not clear in the packet. With regards to the workers' compensation insurance being separate from the 5,300 insurance, I was just wondering what all is included in the Fund 5,300 insurance. Is that all of the liability? Is it all of the facilities? Is it all of the grounds? Just because it seems like the district, possibly through Capri, is getting a much better deal than we up at the POA we're getting. I did want to mention that I'm somewhat terrified by the 3.75 million in land acquisitions for the upcoming fiscal year. Do want to remind the board that you are a recreation and parks district. If you're going to acquire recreational land, I'm not going to complain about that. But if you're acquiring non-recreational land, like some of the previous acquisitions, there might be some pushback. And with regards to the immense increase in the program contract labor, I don't know if that's from the neighbor to neighbor grant. And I mentioned this previously, but it would be nice to see like a separation with regards to the significant shortfall in anticipated grant income for this year, which occurred because of the delays in Lake Ridge. So there was nothing to reimburse. So it's difficult to assess how many of our dollars are being spent in these areas versus how many of the state or federal government's dollars are being spent. And that might be too difficult for you to account. I'm certainly it's not going to happen this year, but in the future, it would be better to have an understanding of what are the taxpayers of the district subsidizing programs as opposed to when this is being funded through the state or something like that. Because I'm very happy to see all the state and federal income that has been coming in. And with regards to the six-figure dipping into reserves, the district is in a much better financial position than the county has been. That the county anticipated that they would have to dip in 3.2 million this year from the PG&E settlement, and they're looking at least an $11 million shortfall. So the district's sane investment strategy has done very well to put the district in a strong financial position going forward, as operations and maintenance are going to continue to increase as many of these facilities, such as Noble and Lake Ridge, do get developed. So I think those are all the comments on my card. Thank you.
Want me to answer those now or try to? Mr. Stelmaker, you may have to come back to the first one. I'll go through the other items here. So the 5,300 is the insurance. We do separate out our workers' comp as under personnel. So that's kind of facilities. And we are quite pleased with our Capri, our insurer. It's been very cost effective for us, and they provided good service on it. I will point out that the reserve that's it's capital improvements and acquisitions. So it's not strictly just acquisitions. Those are for a variety of improvements. In fact, I think the bulk of those funds are related to improvements in the district here, new parks, new projects that we are undertaking the next year. On the grant stuff is very much challenged. I think that we are working on a couple of tools that may help us with that. I think just one thing that I think is important to keep in mind is every time we invoice the state, for example, there's a 10% withholding. So they withhold 10% until completion of the entire project. So depending on how quickly that grant 3 or 4 years out on a large project is a significant amount of funds that we can't even avail ourselves of until that project's completed. And so we're going to try and come up with some ways to do that, because I think it is challenging, and it's very easy, I think, for organizations to get inflated budget syndrome or something, that you look at that budget because you have grant funds. Those grant funds aren't there forever. So we're going to kind of look at the next couple of years. In fact, I think there's a statement in here about looking at what our baseline expenses are. So that may help us kind of arrive at that. Neighbor to neighbor grant, I think, is actually going to be a fairly quick turnaround from all indications. So we're going to have a little bit better cash flow on that than some of the other larger projects that may be capital related and a lot more documentation. I was going to comment one thing on the reserves. We had a staff member go to a training recently on financial responsibility, financial strategies for rec and park districts. And that staff member talking to other colleagues from other districts is it's bleak for a lot of the districts right now. And so when we're talking about our budget, we're sitting relatively good shape in comparison. And the first one I need clear. How were they arrived at, or?
All right, current fiscal year and next fiscal year, because you've got the 2021-22 and the 22-23. And maybe that's a typo, that's what she's not.
You want to address that, Christy? On the FTE? Do you recall what page that's on? Oh, projected. Yeah, I think that is a typo, actually. Yeah, this is page. Yes.
7 for the fiscal year.
Yes, we'll verify that, but I am almost certain that table got updated except for those years.
Thank you.
Thanks for the comment.
Do we have any more public comment? Scott? Anybody online?
Yes.
All right, and I'm going to close the hearing to the public. And we will have board discussion.
I have one question. Would it be a good supportive document to have that chart that we have that talks about what grant for what project, how much the grant was for, and so far how much has been reimbursed, and the outstanding balance? Because a lot of this refers to grants, but it's not understood of like how much the grant is, or how, and you're right, it's going to take a couple of years for all that to get reimbursed. And so maybe if at the end of every fiscal year, when we do the budget, that chart is in there with where we are to date as a supportive document for this, a supportive chart for this document.
Yeah, we're hoping that we put it out on a more regular basis, like we're doing something that a dashboard like this on a quarterly basis. Just to kind of keep track of it and see how much might be accumulating, how much might be expected, when a grant is closed. We're still working on that.
Okay.
And so Christy, I don't know if you want to add anything to that part of it, but I think the idea is, I think it's something you guys are going to see once we have it up and running. You'll see more frequently, and we are can provide updates as to what's billing, what's been expended, what's been billed out, and then the total. I think that gives you guys a lot of information, like per grant, going forward. But yeah.
So if I may add to that comment, I was aware that it's a tool that hasn't been refined as yet, the staff's been working on. But and I think your point's valid, Mary, that once that's fully refined and we have it issued on a more regular basis, then it should become part and parcel of the fiscal year budget that we entertain adopting and sharing with the public in subsequent fiscal years. But with that in mind, I would, if the board concurs, I would encourage staff to accelerate your efforts so we can see that tool at least 3 times a year, if not more. I think so far it's only happened once or twice at the most. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that. I was looking at the other comment on FTE. So your question was regarding the status of grant reimbursement?
There was a chart that we all saw, I think twice, and it had the list of grants, had the amount of the grant, had the due dates, which always get extended luckily, and then how much had been reimbursed to date. And a lot of that pertains to this document. And so my question was, would it be a good supporting chart to put in here? Because all the grants are kind of mixed in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If not in the budget report itself, I think it's something that we're aspiring to include in our regular board packet with the financial reports. And it's aspirational at this point because once we move to construction on some of these projects, we'll have a more definitive timeline. We have the bids come in, and then it's, the schedule is more known that, okay, we're going to be build this much for this portion or these significant tasks and deliverables. And so we pay that out, and then we get the reimbursement, estimating 8 weeks after billing. So I think at that point we'll have, a better reference point for the larger development projects. But in terms of for example, the neighbor to neighbor grant, there's, it's still changing in terms of onboarding partners to put on events and programs and that sort of thing, and assessing what their budgetary needs are in alignment with, what was budgeted in the grant proposal. So those maybe would flux a little bit more, but I think once we get into the construction phase, we would be able to, at least on the development projects, provide a more consistent idea of what's coming in terms of what we're going to be paying out, and then what the reimbursement estimates would be on that.
Thank you.
I do see that tool as probably being almost more macro, and more kind of multi-year, that, because I think that it's going to have we have $12 million worth of projects, and it's, kind of mapping it out over time. We kind of keep score a little bit, but a big part of it on the year to year is kind of that cash flow timing. And that part's hard to predict. So I like the phrase aspirational on that, because I think it will help us to be better informed on it, but it's just not quite there yet, and may not be for budgetary purposes, but I think it certainly makes people feel more comfortable about those quotes that might be there on the grant reimbursements and so forth. So,
well, if it gets done quarterly, like you were saying, I think that would be good. And then the public, that's available to the public, which I think is important for transparency reasons. I have one more kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but a question of, okay, so right now we have a lot of outstanding insurance funds. We have outstanding grant funds. We have outstanding projects that go with those funds. Just out of pulling something out of the air, basically, would you say that maybe in 5 years, all those things might be, I mean, we'll be on to other things as well, but what's happening right now, do you think we'll be kind of closed out with all that stuff? I know that that's a in the air question. But
yeah, because I try and associate uncertainty a lot of times with, whenever you have a number, there's this uncertainty associated with it.
Sure.
So I think that there are certain things that we can make some projections on, and something that's really challenging, I think, from a budgetary standpoint, are some of those we kind of have to put in the budget, because, for example, like some of the grant stuff, we're expending it. We may not get that reimbursement, but that reimbursement's either going to show up as, quote unquote, a windfall in a future year when you go have very few expenses, but we get a check related to that grant. Versus right now, it's kind of, it looks like it's bleeding. It's a weight on the organization. I think there are certain things, and this might be something good for us to hit almost project by project. So if I think about like a 5-year window and the neighbor to neighbor grant, that's a 2-year project. So yes, we should have that wrapped up by then. Other things I think that are moving along a little bit faster, hopefully in the next couple of years, will be the insurance rebuild. That will be a very significant one for us. And that will be both lost revenue and then 2 major facilities for us, the aquatic rec center and then the new shop facility. So those are 2 big items that we as an aside, we'll be bringing back another revised plan, hopefully to the Rec and Park Committee end of this month. So that gets that underway. I think a 5-year window is probably not bad to think about, but there's always delays on certain projects. So that might be something worth us kind of working through. Maybe it's part of the dashboard too on years and how much years a grant has, where we are in the process, and then, kind of some uncertainty or probability on that. Is that going to pay out by 2028?
Right. Well, and like you
whatever.
said, grants are not going to be as abundant or might not be as abundant as they have been. And so that makes me feel like projects and new programs might come to a little bit slower pace than they are right now. And so if, say in 5 years, all of this stuff that we still have hanging out is wrapped up, it seems like things will be, okay, let's get to work now on the basics. What is the basic budget for the district, what you've talked about and all that. So
Yeah, I'd say if you want to look at it as far as a normalized curve, we're still on the climbing part of the curve. We haven't hit kind of like our peak expenses, our peak busyness on these projects. So then the reimbursements will be another curve that follows that with the state's lag time.
Okay, thank you. Good job on this. I know this was a lot of work from management staff and or supervisor staff as well as management staff. So, and admin staff and
Yeah, thank you for that.
everybody else. So thank you.
I have to comment accordingly. I really want to commend the staff. This format of a budget is exceptional. And I'm hopeful that we will adopt it and run with it and utilize it in the future fiscal years as well. I do have a simple question, though. There may not be a good answer to this. As we all know, we have grants that we've been successfully awarded, and we're in the process, slow as it may be, to try to implement some of those grants towards programs, recreational activities, hopefully construction of some projects, that type of thing. Given what's happened this current fiscal year with the state budget, and the fact that we're being asked to entertain adopting our budget tonight, the state, if the legislature gets paid, they have to adopt their budget by the 15th of this month, which is only 3 days hence. I'm hearing mixed stories through our lobbying analysts on behalf of Park and Recs and other organizations that I don't know how to best describe it, but whatever gets adopted, there's going to be some unintended consequences that may come with that adopted budget at the state level that may or may not affect our grants that are underway. So with that in mind, even though we adopt something tonight, as you staff become more informed about the outcome of that budget adoption and its consequences, I urge you to come back, work with the finance committee if we need to make any necessary changes subject to an adopted fiscal year. And I only say that politely because we don't know what the outcome that the state's going to do as yet. But the state is in a deficit, quite frankly, and I don't want to sound negative, but I guess I'm old enough and I've been around long enough to see the kind of games that the state will play budgetarily that sometimes can affect local government and hurts our local citizens, where I think we do the best job of serving our citizens compared to the state. But that's my bias. I apologize for that. But anyway, Mr. Chair, if there's no more questions from the staff, I'd be honored to make a motion.
Please do.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I move that the Board of Directors adopt Resolution 24-06-1-539, adopting the fiscal year 2024-2025 final budget for Fund 2510 in the amount of $4,784,300 and funds as detailed in Exhibit B. With that resolution, there's two exhibits. Exhibit A is actually the fiscal year budget of that dollar amount I quoted. And Exhibit B, I think, relates to something else. Well, anyway.
It just the fund account.
It's
Fund
fund
account
account
total,
totals,
yes.
right. So then, anyway, that's in my motion for that resolution with both exhibits.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call?
Director Alma Green,
Aye.
Director Mary Belfay,
Aye.
Secretary Steve Rodwick,
Aye.
and Chairperson Robert Anderson.
Aye.
Motion carries with 4 ayes.
Mr. Chair, I also move that the PRPD Board of Directors adopt resolution 24-06-2-540, adopting I believe it's fiscal year 2024-25 PRPD general reserves of, is it actually 60,000 or is it 56,700? It's 60,000. I'm sorry. Go ahead. So, and that resolution also has 2 exhibits, A and B, that reflect that action.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, roll call.
Director Alma Green,
Aye.
Director Mary Belfay,
Aye.
Secretary Steve Rodwick,
Aye.
and Chairperson Robert Anderson.
Aye.
Motion carries with 4 ayes.
Okay. That opens us to public comment for anything that is not on the agenda tonight.
Just briefly note that I encountered a very challenging bicycle feature on the Yellowstone Kelly Trail a few minutes ago in the form of a black oak tree that had fallen across everything just north of the horse arena. I believe that's town jurisdiction, so I'll have to send them the coordinates. I'll also say, for those of you who are interested in hiking in the flumes up north of Paradise Lake, so Hendricks Ditch has been running for more than a month now, but the Butte Canal that used to provide scenic views of the canyon running north of DeSable Lake has been dry pretty much since last summer. And PG&E is telling us they're probably not going to put that back into operation. So if the district has any interest, this is lying pretty much outside the jurisdictional boundary of the district, but if you have any particular interest in ensuring that these recreational amenities remain available to your citizens, we would appreciate some kind of a letter, and we could work with you on the specifics of that.
Thank you, Mr. Stonebreaker. Any more public comments, Mr. Amick? And that brings us to the consent agenda.
I'm going to pull item, gosh, what is that now? Sorry, the numbers are 4.1.
Do we have a motion to accept the rest of the consent?
I motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 4.1.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk?
You guys were so fast. Give me 2 seconds.
Was that Mary that seconded?
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I pulled 4.1 because under on that agenda under public comment, I put,
We need a motion on the floor. We're
Motion.
asking you to call roll.
sorry,
Then it's all yours.
Director Alma Green,
Aye.
Director Mary Belfay,
Aye.
Steve Rodwick, Secretary Steve Rodwick,
Aye.
and Chairperson Robert Anderson.
Aye.
Motion carries with 4 ayes. All right. So on the minutes from May, under public comment, item 2, I put no instead of none. And then on 3.1, under the minutes from April, we are changing the motion to reflect, approve the minutes of April 10th with noted corrections. And that's all I changed on the minutes.
Mr.
May 8th. May 8th.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Yeah. Director Alma Green,
Aye.
Director Mary Belfay,
Aye.
Secretary Steve Rodwick,
Aye.
and Chairperson Robert Anderson.
Aye.
Motion carries with 4 ayes.
That brings us to committee reports. Finance Committee.
Well, as finance committee member, I think we just did the heavy lifting.
That brings us to old business. Item 6.1, Yellowstone Kelly Trail, bike skills, features and amenities.
Scott, do we have anyone online? Negative. Let's delay that. Let's table that.
All right, that brings us,
I do not.
that brings us to item 6.2, Lake Ridge Park update. Okay. We're not gonna table them, we're throwing them out.
Yeah, check again. And there's feedback, by the way. I'm not sure why. Christy, you want to? You're fine. Hey, Scott, I'm not able to shut off my mute over here for some reason. Yeah, so I don't know what happened if they got blocked out. But both parties got that information, and Christy just told me that Melton Design Group was online earlier. So yeah, Patrick was from there. So why don't we maybe move forward with some of the other items and return to that and see if we can get a resolution on it. Oh, that's them. Okay. I would suggest we. Well, Patrick, let's do a mic check with you.
Yeah, you guys got me?
Can you count down from 100, please?
100. Okay, 100, 99, 98, 97, 96, 95, 94.
So I think you're there. You won't have to go into the 70s or anything. So I think that's it.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Is the volume high enough? I can control a little bit on my side.
You sound pretty good over here. If I need to pause you, then I know how to do that.
Sounds good.
So hey, Patrick, let me do just a quick introduction, and then we'll kick it over to you. I know that members of the public and our board, our staff, really eager to check on progress with Lake Ridge. So we asked here Patrick from the Melton Design Group to provide a bit of an update, some timeline, then we could kind of follow up with some of the other funding questions that we've been working on. So Patrick, you want to take it away?
Yes, I can. And I'm joining with video so you can see there actually is somebody here. Thank you for your time to chat about this project. It's kind of a soft update, meaning I'll try to go through things without too much detail. Hopefully, if there's questions, I can entertain those as well. So we are in June of 24, and I'm gonna kind of skip ahead a little bit and then circle back. Our plan that we shared with Dan and his staff, Christy, is that we would put this project out to bid in winter, and that might be January or February of 25. and get the earliest possible date for the contractor to get into the ground when we have, weather and soils that allow for grading operations, those kind of operations. That's kind of where we're at. And then the construction window would be through probably November 1. So that's kind of the rough schedule. Where we're at today is we're in our contract, and also where we're actually at with our work is design development, which could be considered 30% construction documents. And I know that's kind of vague, but what it shows is intent, proof of concept, and going through some of the early engineering. And what that might be in relevant terms is we had a bit of time spent making sure that we had the correct locations and soils for leach field. We do have restrooms slated for independent restroom building and then restrooms within a community center. So it's required that we have a leach field, right? And then we have a spare. And so we wanted to make sure that we were drilled down and actually had the locations correct. We have an engineer on board that did that, and it did the actual test bits. We got some help from Dan's staff to actually perform that work. So that saved some money, which was helpful. We appreciate that. And then there was a bit of time to go through the county, unfortunately, to my frustration, but we actually got approval for that recently and have that on record. Currently, I have my geotech engineer out there. Last week they did what they call seismic refraction. They're, I believe, yesterday on site digging, also for soil testing. So we have a few areas where we ask them to test, take soil, do pits, and that's in areas typically where we have footings and roads. And so we will get that evaluation. I believe the timeline is roughly 30 days for them to prepare a report. But I believe they also have to send the soil samples out to a lab. So there's a little bit of that schedule is out of their control. But what this does is frees us up to finish up the design development 30% docs. We were reluctant to go too far forward and incur a big redesign and reshifting of elements and roads until this work occurred. So that kind of is now allowing us to go forward. And I will say that what we are finding out so far is meaning we don't have to do much redesign. So internally, we are working through some of the design development of the play areas and also the main pedestrian entry toward the amphitheater, and making sure that those concepts work, meaning we're fully CADing stuff, making sure measurements are correct, making sure we have areas for stormwater treatment off of roads, whereas before you might not have seen that on the pretty picture. Right now they're being designed in and we're accommodating them. And fortunately, we allowed enough room for that to occur, so you won't really see much of a design change from what you've seen previously. But when we do these engineering features, for instance, the stormwater treatment, they'll be incorporated into the landscape to be seamless. With normal landscaping, they will function to treat the stormwater and actually perk it into the soil, such that we can have plants using that stormwater. And in the main play area, we have some themes that we're working on. Not all have been vetted and shown to staff, so I'm a little reluctant to go forward with that, but we have a series of meetings set up to show them that. One thing we're working with are some of the budgetary constraints, meaning, we never have enough money, but Dan has secured a grant with, through CPRS that we're working with the vendors that are, we can to get quote unquote play equipment on discount, meaning there is some grant money. So we're trying to utilize that. Looking at the vendors, the manufacturers that would work with our theming. We're really trying to do something different with this park, make it unique for people that live here that need and want that for the future, but also that it's could be a destination as the area starts to grow more toward the future. And so what that means is carefully selecting play equipment that follows a theme that's true and genuine to the area and original. And also, maintenance is not a detriment to the budget for PRPD. So we're not looking for off-the-shelf play equipment that's plasticky, excuse the expression. We want some durability. We want unique designs without going custom. We could go custom on that stuff, but it does chew up the budget. But there's a lot of unique manufacturers out there doing really good work. And so we're working with them, again, to utilize that grant money in the play area. In the main plaza area between the community center and the play, it's at LA to pedestrian access to the amphitheater. We're trying to present that area with a little more elegance, a little more entry, provide shade so that it can be a sitting area in the summertime. Has surfaces that can absorb rainwater, so we don't have runoff that just goes in where it should not go. So there's a depth of care trying to design this such that it functions, and we're not putting all this infrastructure in the ground that costs money and really doesn't provide recreation. Okay, so we're designing in that way. We have done a preliminary grading plan with our engineer. We have several engineers on the project, with our civil engineer, and they show us in balance. We're looking at reorienting the soccer field or the multi-use sport field in such a way to reduce the amount of fill. And so that's a subtle change. They have performed the grading exercise, but also have profiled the roads and other areas to show where cut and fill is. And in that same vein, grading is going to be a large operation. We were working with, as best we could, with Butte College to interest them in providing some preliminary rough grading to our site and for their students to learn on with real site. Unfortunately, over a few months, that did not come to fruition, but we felt it was worthy talking to Dan and Christy and working with Butte College, that it was worth the time spent to see if that would work out, saving quite a bit of money. What it meant was breaking out the plan set and having them do that work in this different scenario. It didn't work out, so we're kind of going with a conventional single contractor with subs to get that work done. But again, it all goes back to us trying to wring out as much value from the grant you do have, the Prop 68 grant, to make that work. So that's kind of work that we've been performing. You just don't see the net result yet, and you may never will, but we have been working hard to make this a great project and utilize the money carefully. So that's kind of happening in the background, has been happening in the background. I have some slides that I'm looking at just to make sure I don't miss anything. On the community building, Dan has worked hard to secure funding. I'll let Dan speak a little more to this. He's a little more connected to it. But briefly, what's the feasibility of a different type of program for the building, any resilient center, whether we could chase grants for that. So our architect came up with some scenarios, provide materials for him to do that. I'll let him speak to that a little more once I'm through here. Going back to some of the play elements, right now we're looking at, again, elements that are unique. I've talked about that briefly, but also create a lot of play experiences. And so we have kind of a steep slope. So we're looking at maybe terracing it, hoping to use some of the basalt that came out of the water tank construction down there in Paradise. So we're hoping to gain some of that so we don't have to build engineered walls. If we don't get that and we have to build engineered walls, we may not be able to afford them. So then we have another option to slope between an upper area and a lower area, take advantage of that slope, have play on the slope. There's ramps you can put on, slides you can put on. So we're kind of looking at two things in that area, two concepts. Again, not trying to get the most we can from our site and from the budget we have. I think some of the elements that we've talked about in the past, basketball, of course, multi-use sport for free play, soccer, plentiful walking trails, maintenance buildings so that PRPD doesn't have to haul equipment around, so they can stage from there and support that park and any other park nearby. Those elements are still in play. Shade structures, planted trees for shade, community building, amphitheater. Amphitheater, again, costs them a fair bit of money. So we're looking at ways to produce something that doesn't drive maintenance. So many times you see a grassy seat with a concrete bench you sit on. We're looking for a more durable surface so that these mowings don't have to occur on these flat areas between the seats. And it'll be more durable, reduce amount of maintenance, and probably in the end last longer and look better. Again, looking to get the most for the park and long-term maintenance, lower long-term maintenance. Looking at reusing any wood that we can source locally through any of the Butte Fire Safe Council. We have someone looking out for cedar wood for us that's a little more durable and long-lasting for some of our venture play, and also to nestle it into some of our plantings, and just to reuse the wood, not purchase it from elsewhere, not have it go to wood chips or to maybe a cogen type plant. Play elements, again, of the area, more on the natural side, less out of a mold and plastic with kind of garish colors, theming that's appropriate for the site. Again, just going back through the schedule briefly, we have quite a few milestones that we have gone through. I'm looking, you don't see it, but I'm looking at our schedule, and we're almost two thirds of the way through it. So we're really kind of coming to the area where a lot of design development is going to come to fruition. Now we're looking at construction docs, and it's going to move a little faster. Again, with the dates I told you before, construction, hopefully March of a bid in winter 25. Construction March through October 2025, and a grand opening shortly thereafter. Whew. Now I know I rushed through that a little bit. I said this would be a kind of a soft kind of preview or update of where we're going, but I'll entertain questions if you have any.
Patrick, I was going to just have you address one more thing before I open up to questions for folks. But we talked about doing a workshop in September up in Magalia, and just kind of working through some of the, by that point, we should have some choices perhaps on playground equipment or some of the color patterns and things like that to share, with the public out there. I'm just kind of, I know that we talked about some dates. I don't know if you've been able to arrive at one, and then just maybe walk through with the board and folks in the audience here, how you foresee that workshop proceeding.
Yeah, as far as a date, I'm looking at our schedule. It probably would make sense to have it in September. When we get closer, there might be shift a day or a week here and there, but I think that's a good time frame, Dan. And so what people will see is a strong theme. They'll understand the cost associated with different elements for different areas, how that's applied. And also, there will be options for many times there's a whole slew of colors for certain things. Right now, we're kind of arriving at more muted tones, but we also want to have areas of play that have like the spark. And some of that will come from the materials we select. So we'll have more mood boards or materials boards for people to understand. And again, repurposing what's local, what's nearby in a way that is kind of playful. So yes, Dan, those kind of elements, the colors, and then a lot of times with play, you need an area around it that's safe for that play and for fall zones. So it's somewhat of a tight site. So we will show alternatives there. You mentioned having a slope versus engineered walls. So if we have a slope arrangement, we can show elements that can be, what is more desirable for different people. We're trying to show, again, a little more inclusivity, which you'll see. And what that would also mean is for people who aren't as able-bodied, aren't able to play on some of these elements independently. So there are areas for them to have cognitive and sensory experiences, either from a wheelchair or assisted, that are less climbing, right? Instead of, if they're not able to use their entire body, they can still have an assistant help them to these elements. But there will also be stuff that they can do while in a chair, overhead stuff, sensory and cognitive experience as well. So we're looking at that, and that would be part of the workshopping input stage that Dan is talking about. What was your other question?
I think that mostly covered it. We had talked, I think about that a little bit different, more of a workshop setting and more just sort of having some displays around too. If people had questions, more of a round table rather than a straight up presentation. Here it is. And, submit questions at the end. So kind of a little bit more interactive, was just some of the approaches that we talked about. So that lends itself well to maybe more of a public, information workshop type meeting rather than a board meeting or even a committee meeting. So I just wanted to make that clear to folks.
Yeah, maybe agreed, Dan. Maybe then you can talk about if you guys are through with me, maybe talk about additional funding in the building, if you would, Dan.
Patrick, this is Al McGran. Quick question. I thought I heard you as part of your update. You indicated that the experience that your firm and your engineers have with, I believe I heard this, the Butte County Environmental Health folks, as far as them buying off on our soils analysis as it relates to sufficient soils and soils capacity for handling the estimated sewage effluent, so forth. There was frustrating experience with that. Was there unforeseen delays in time? And if so, what was the ultimate cause of that delay?
Yeah, I think we have our approval, Al. Time delays, and I'm not sure what I can attribute that to. Maybe overworked staff or too busy. We do have good soils. We did get approval. I think that's where we need to go. Again, we were reluctant to proceed with design in case we had to do a redesign for some reason.
That was my impression too.
Al, I don't think he could hear you because you're.
From the county folks.
Yeah, I'm not hearing the question. Sorry.
You said you got approval from the county. What was the estimated date of approval, documentation reflecting that?
I don't have it in my head. I can, if you bear with me, have it in.
Well, let's put it this way. Have you shared that with our staff here?
Oh yeah, it's been turned over to Dan.
So Dan and the
You
staff.
possess the document.
Okay, they brought that information. Okay, thank you.
More board comment?
I'll just, this is Steve, Patrick, are we, incorporating, our master plan and our trails to, with Lake Ridge? We'll have established trailheads, emanating from the park with, that'll dovetail well with the trail master plan.
Yeah, there's I guess a connection down on Dogtown And so we have a network of trails. So some of these pathways will be, paved. Some will be maybe on the basalt chip or decomposed granite, a little more rough. And then some will be like Forest Service trails, packed dirt. And so that would be a connection down to Dogtown. There's a point there that connects to the previous master plan.
I was just going to add, we're almost considering kind of a little bit separate right now, because I think that the developed side of the park there, that's where a lot of folks they wanted ability to walk, and kind of have a sturdy surface, and so that's part of the more of the park development that Patrick's working on. And I think the more rugged stuff is going to be, some planning out in the field when we get to that stage on where the end and start is. One important consideration too, I think, with that, we're still in conversation with the neighbors, because there could be an alignment that goes across the neighboring property, and that could make the trail a little bit easier, especially crossing Dogtown Road. So that's still underway. And by the way, the chip housing project seems like it's moving along over there. So that certainly has potentially implications for us, although we're kind of planning with the universe that we know right now. So I will just mention, oh, never mind. You covered it earlier, Patrick.
On that slope, you were referring to the slope of the property and the children or the playground activities, and you mentioned something about a slide would be a possibility there in a whatever plan A or B you were talking about. So could you put a recirculating water slide in there for the for a water feature? Because that would be a blast.
Yeah, that would pretty much be the same setup you'd use for a pool, right? You have water contact. So recirculating system with pumps and filters and chlorination. I'll defer to Christy on that. I do not believe that was in the grant, but we are looking for a way to have, if not symbolic, we may run stormwater off of roofs when we get to that point into swales in a way that doesn't look like it's a gutter. Right, you'd see them in the street. We want to incorporate that into design, and once all the sediment's dropped out, it can release and flow through the park. So interactive, yeah. The spray, as far as water contact and a spray ground, I don't think that's in the grant. I will tell you though that one just opened in Chico in Dorothy Johnson Park. It is very popular. I wish we had the money or this was written into the grant. There's a lot of opportunity for cooling in the warm weather for adults and children. It's a really it's something to be thinking about in the future.
Mary's kind of describing a water park or a log ride from a theme park, but there is a requirement for us to do a water play feature or splash pad. So and that's part of the list of amenities that were required.
In that park, you mean?
In that park, yeah. And I think we had a very modest approach to it, but just something that's playful that gives a ability for kids to play around with. And I know that Patrick's absolutely right. Believe it or not, that has to be essentially it's considered a pool,
Right.
So it has to have the right chlorination and filtration and all of that testing on a regular basis.
Right.
There's even if it's a modest feature, there's quite a bit to it. But that was one of the amenities that were listed on the grant.
Right. I understand that. I was being part wish list. And I'm glad to hear that there's a water feature for kids and possibly adults, because I've been having a lot of people ask me, when's Park and Rec going to put in a water feature somewhere? So that's good to hear that that'll be up there.
Is there any public comment or questions for Patrick?
At least some of this will be for Patrick. So one of the questions is everything happening on the red dirt? Are we doing anything down on the Lahar Bretzia? Should we go through this one at a time? Can you hear me?
It was a little fuzzy.
Okay, well, I can
It was a
shout.
little- Okay.
Okay, so the first question is all of the development going to be on the red dirt or is any of it going to be down on the Lahar Bretzia?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, it's in the red dirt.
Okay. So you keep mentioning this community center, which I believe is the Diane Harmachek Recreation Center. And so that won't be ready for the October 25 grand opening, right? We're gonna have the actual park features, the outdoor things, and then the building will come later.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Dan to speak to that. We're looking right now to maybe phase that.
Right. Okay. And I've been commenting for some number of years that this is sort of occurring in a black box. And I definitely think that whatever we have, was supposed to be this week, but if it happens in September, definitely something like we had in October of 2020 on the site would be more productive than what we had last year with the one person question, one person answer. So it would be nice to see, like we don't see any site plans today or any of that, or what the options would be for some of these features, and get some community input, because the people on the upper ridge west of Little Butte Creek have no public park. And it's really important that this is like our Crane Park, that this is for us and not focused on what's going to drag people up the hill across the dam. And so that's what you'll hear from everybody when you get up there, that we need to focus on the underserved population in Magalia west of the creek, rather than all of the things will get people coming up from, Chico or wherever. That's what's most important.
Thank you, Ms. Stonebreaker. That brings us to new business. Thank you, Patrick.
All right, thank you.
Item 7.1, fiscal year 2024-25 employee salary scale.
Kind of alluded to this earlier. This is an item that's gone through both our personnel committee and our finance committee. It's been considered within the context of the budget. It's the salary scale is in that narrative. We do have it separated out. It's a little hard to read, but a little bit clear to look at. And if you want to look at it, it is page 60. Thank you. Page 60. So it should look familiar to you. We've kind of changed the format a little bit on it. But that is that proposed scale that has gone through our finance and personnel committee. Recommend its approval as presented.
I have a question before we entertain an action. The scale, as I see it, we all know that the minimum hourly wage is $16 an hour, right? Currently.
$16.50.
It's $16.50. Then how can we justify a swim aid in this scale at $16 an hour, or an intern at $16 an hour?
Let me take a look at something here. I'm wondering if we got. Yeah, I think it is 16, but
And then if it is 16 and not $16.50, it's pretty obvious to me that it'll increase mid-fiscal year again, probably another 50 cents an hour. So why not our scale reflect that to accommodate it rather than us have to?
yeah, let me give a little background on that. So, the way that it has worked out actually for the last 5 years, that the state of California has had a very regular minimum wage increase.
Right.
And so we've set that to abide by California state law January 1st. Now, in some of those years, board staff saw a need to increase our full-time staff. Wages on the part-time scale are dominated by that minimum wage. So when minimum wage goes up, basically everything else goes up by a proportional, if it's 50-cent increase, all of those wages go up 50 cents. What we've had a need is to reset that with our permanent staff. There's been increases, and almost all of those have been increases. They've been tied in with the fiscal year. So they've been a little bit out of sync. I think the idea on this is the state has not yet produced, they've been very responsive. Frankly, we were surprised last year when they issued a minimum wage increase I believe, passed in September for January 1st. So we had to catch up to that right away. Board and staff took quick action. We were ready for that
Right.
year. Some agencies weren't ready. They had to do it retroactively. So we were ready for that. So we've been in this mode of waiting to see what the state does and sort of matching that rather than anticipating it. At this point, the state is not proposing any minimum wage increases. The last one just occurred, obviously January 1st this year. So we're not yet 6 months into the new increase. What we felt the need for was to increase the make the recommendation for increasing the permanent full-time staff.
Well, bear with me. I may be having a senior moment, but my recollection was when the state passed this minimum hourly wage law, what they passed was something that automatically changed the minimum wage 50 cents increase per hour for consecutive calendar years. And I don't recall whether or not it was in perpetuity or it was an initial 5 or 7 year period.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's based on something else.
So it was a 5-year period and was raised by $1 each year. So that's one from 2015 to 2020 was a dollar, and I may be a year off there, 2016 to maybe
Yeah.
21, but it was a 5-year increment to bring it up to $5 more per hour for minimum wage. Since then, they've done 2 subsequent increases that are outside of that. So they've been responsive to it. They're separate. They're not scaled. They're not necessarily tied into a future change. They've been a change in minimum wage. And so that's what we're reacting to. There's nothing for us to respond to at this point. I don't know if you mentioned state budget, if that has impact on their decision making on it outside inflation slowed down maybe slightly, but
Yeah.
I think there's a fair amount that's gone into that with their changes.
Right.
We've been just sort of reacting to the state on the hourly wages.
Okay. Mr. Chair, do you want to open this agenda item to the public?
Yes. Is there any public comment? Mr. Amick. Then can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that the board approves the 2024-2025 employee salary scale as presented.
I'll second. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Director Alma Green, Director Mary Belfay,
Aye.
Secretary C. Rodwick,
Aye.
and Chairperson Robert Anderson.
Aye.
Motion carries with 4 ayes.
And that brings us to a 5-minute break if everyone concurs. That brings us to a 5-minute break if everyone concurs. And we're back. And that brings us to new business 7.2 appropriation limit resolution.
Yeah, so the appropriation limit, it's just a routine thing that the county sends me documents of the updated population, either percentage increase or decrease. And then we kind of just get the numbers through typing those into a spreadsheet that Dan has had, and then it calculates everything for me.
There's, this is something that's just a requirement. There's no real discretion on it. It's just a formula that we put together on it that meets, as it outlines in the resolution there. On page, by the way, 62 has a little bit about the calculation itself, but we recommend approval of the resolution as it's presented.
No board comment?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. Just gotta wait for the public input and then we'll take action.
Any public? Then I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve this resolution number 24-06-3-5401 fiscal year 2024-25 appropriation limit as presented.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, roll call vote?
Director Alma Green,
Aye.
Director Mary Belfay,
Aye.
Secretary Steve Rodwick,
Aye.
Chairperson Robert Anderson.
Aye.
Motion carries with 4 ayes.
Did we ever get any news on item 6.1?
Nothing.
Okay.
I think Sarah was going to check her messages, but I have not. So
And that brings us to the district report then. Ma'am?
yeah, so I'll start with a couple of things. I know we are just absolutely hopping with just recreation activities and staff kicking off different events. So it's a pretty busy time right now for our staff. I was going to mention just a couple of things. One was I have attached here as attachment A, the Butte County Local Hazard Mitigation Plan. And folks are probably familiar with that process, but I just thought it was helpful to have this overview on there. Working through all various agencies are working on their annexes as we are, and the county's leading this effort. Coming back our way. The other things I want to mention all related to rec. So I think maybe we should kick it over to our rec staff to go over some of the key items.
Hello, this is Rec Supervisor Jeff Daly. Go over some of the programs. It's a busy time, as you can imagine. A month ago when I was standing here, it was kind of a nail biter because we were in the middle of lifeguard training and you don't know if the people that you want to hire are going to pass the class, and the whole summer's dependent on that. So things are looking good. I'll start with aquatics at the Paradise Pool, and then I can talk a little bit about what's happening at the Concal Pool. In the aquatics, the Paradise Piranhas have been using the pool. They started back on May 6th. A couple things that I wrote in the district report here. We had the Butte County Sheriff's Search and Rescue use the pool for some training on May 18th. Like I said, we had lifeguard training going on. We had 8 people in that class. The staffing did turn out good for the pool. We had 6 returning lifeguards, and we were going to have 5 returning lifeguards, but at the last minute, one called me. It seems like this happens every year and wanted to come back because his other job wasn't working out. So he was a good, he was a pool supervisor. So he was one of the more experienced guards. So we have him back. Anyway, we have 5 new guards in Paradise, 1 new lifeguard in Concal. The first 2 days of the Paradise Pool, just this Monday, we had 86 people use the pool, and Tuesday we had 89 people. So I was going to look up what we had last year for the start. I'm sorry I didn't, but I think I would guess that it's a little higher. This week, the new lifeguards are being trained by our past pool manager, Aaron Singer, who some of you know, who was a longtime pool employee here, and he's kind of acting as a consultant. And he's doing a training on swim lessons, how to teach swim lessons for an hour each morning. And it's been really beneficial for our new guards to learn how to do that. With that being said, we do have 75 kids registered for swim lessons so far, with openings left later in the summer. We have a pool movie at the Paradise Pool June 22nd. We have aqua aerobics happening Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Concal Pool. Some of you probably heard that we weren't able to open this Monday, June 10th, over in Concal. And it was kind of a surprise, and it was a little bit surprised that we weren't notified sooner, but it was kind of an emergency type thing that came up. They did know that they had a leak. They were losing approximately 6,000 gallons of water a day, and they had a repair scheduled to do that. And they found a new issue is the float in their tanks that refill the pool broke. I might have it a little bit wrong, but anyway, those tanks that filled the pool, they couldn't keep up with the leak. So the pool dropped below to where it could be operational, and now they have to have the float in the tank repaired. I don't know exactly how that all works, but it sounds like the water comes into the tanks, and then that's used to replenish pool water.
That's a pretty easy fix, but the problem is that's not a great well. It doesn't produce a ton of water. So to get those tanks filled again and start filling the pool too, it's going to take time.
So we were told by the superintendent we should be ready to open June 17th, which is a week later than we thought. So it's unfortunate for the community and the staff that was going to start over there. Do you have anything to add on that, Dan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just casual conversation with a couple of members of the public came up from Concal asking about the pool and opening date. And I suggested to them, at least for this first part, maybe diverting the kids to swim lessons at Paradise Pool. So I don't know if that's an option for folks. I know that's quite a bit of a trip, but at least for this person, it was something that was considered because they work this direction. So it might be something that actually he thought might be more convenient for him anyway, but depending on the time. So I'm just kind of curious if that's something we're trying to get the word out as well, that there are lessons available at the Paradise Pool before this pool opens.
There's a few slots left for certain lessons that start on the 17th also. So by then their pool will be open, hopefully. But we could definitely accommodate some Concal people. Softball, really good news. We've got 25 adult teams participating in softball this year, starting this week. Last year we had 20 teams. So I think the year before that we had probably a few less than that, 17 or 18. So between the men's, women's, and co-ed, we have 25 teams. So if you average 12 players per team, that's 300 adults playing softball out here. So that's a pretty good turnout. We also have a men's tourney and a co-ed tournament later in the month. The rest of the program's going on. Tiny Tots, we have summertime Tots happening. We have Tot soccer. As far as the preschool, we have a Pony 101 horseback riding class that started this week. Judo is happening throughout the summer. We have a few youth sports skills classes. We have ongoing dance fusion, yoga, and Tai Chi. And we have some upcoming classes, tennis lessons, golf lessons, and a new canning class. And between all those programs, there's almost another 300 registered participants. So I feel like it's really good numbers. And that's not including, this is just kind of stuff that's under my jurisdiction. It's not including any of the camps or anything. So a lot of people doing stuff. It's a busy time. Right now, it's a lot of action, reaction, and just dealing with what happened the day before, and hopefully not having too many problems. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I had a quick question. This is more, you probably don't have the numbers yet, but what are your impressions as far as like where we are right now versus where we were last year as far as number of participants? I know we have a lot more opportunities for folks than we did a short time ago, but I'm just kind of curious as to, is there some kind of percentage or vibe that you can give on, what did it feel like this time last year?
The general vibe, I don't really know percentage wise, but I would say it's probably correlates to the amount of how the population's gone up in town. It feels like the classes are more full. Wait and see how some of the camps do. There's a lot more of them this summer. The swim lessons are almost full. Like I said, more softball teams, from 20 to 25. So that's probably a pretty good indication for adults. Yeah, it just seems like things have really picked up since the last couple of years.
And just to share with the board, we've made a concerted effort to try and start some new things just to see how they would take. I know that the canning class, for example, it's kind of interesting that people find out about that. There's like, oh, you're offering that, and there's seems to be some interest in that. So, I think some of these programs that we try and initially may not be as successful, but I think over time it kind of catches hold. So it'd be interesting to see how some of these develop. And the softball numbers are great.
I have a question based on softball numbers, et cetera, for either Jeff or Dan. I realize we're now at the tail end of spring. We're about to kick off into summer, and though temperature-wise it is summer. Is there any possibility that we could possibly put together a senior softball tournament in the fall? There's still going to be hot weather in the fall, the way things are going, and there's a lot of senior softballers down in the valley that would love to come up on the ridge and play senior softball tournament. I assume tournaments are on weekends. They're not
Yes.
so that wouldn't conflict necessarily with co-ed softball games, which are during the week, are they not, in the fall?
That's correct. Yeah. I don't know if you've talked to Willie Davidson. We have a softball coordinator that I work with pretty
I know
closely.
of him. I know he plays in Chico senior softball in one of their divisions.
He mentioned specifically to me that he knows there's been interest in a senior softball tournament. So I think that is in the works probably for the fall.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I only can speak for a certain age bracket of senior citizens, which is one I belong to. I don't want to sound selfish, and Steve, but I know we can at least get 2 teams from Chico that'll come up that are age 70 and over, and we can get 2 or possibly 3 that'll come up from Lincoln, California, because we go down and play them regularly in their tournaments. And if there's some way you can get Willie how to communicate with the folks down in Lincoln, I think their local teams are called the Red Hawks or something like that.
Yeah, he has a pretty good network of connections with softball people, but maybe we will need to hit you up for a couple phone numbers too.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Dan.
We'll kick it over to Scott. And just as he's walking up, I know last year there was a lot of feedback that we got on new camps and activities. And I think Scott has quite a menu here of new things for us to offer this year. So take it away, Scott.
Thanks, Dan. There's always something interesting about reporting on what's happening a month ago, because it feels a lot of what I'm reading here feels like it was just so long ago because of how much growth we've had as far as the number of staff we have, the demand for the proliferation of the camps. To answer your question that you had, yeah, we're really humming along right now. And it feels like the energy is there and the heat is there to keep us moving. So we wrapped up the outdoor education inside of the umbrella of outdoor education for all. We wrapped up the Youth Advisory Council and its first incantation, and the number of lessons we learned from it are gonna help us run other grants for the rest of my career here and the rest of Christy's career. Agreed? Yeah, it's been a monumental lift on the back end. Yeah, for as long as you'll have me, right? The students, we wrapped it up with an experience at Billy Park just as the sun was setting. A lot of the students, it was very, very emotional for them because they didn't know that, you heard the presentation from them. It was a life-changing program for some of the students. So at the same time, we wrapped up 11 field trips in the month of May alone, most of which were out to the kayaking on the lake, which again, for students who have high adverse childhood experience scores, this is the highlight of their school year. It's not their math tests. It's not graduation. It's coming out and doing this with us. So we did a lot in May. We finished some key training for a staff, specifically Connor Finnegan. He now has the mantle for the Healing Trauma through Nature program. Pretty excited to hand it off to him so I can go do something else. We also hosted 25 participants out to Paradise Lake for the most beautiful astronomy on the lake that I've done. It was glassy. It looked like the pool water that you're seeing up there. It was unbelievable.
What date was that? It was in May?
Well, I can tell you that it was the same date that the moon was actually
Well,
about
I know that,
halfway
but
full.
What was
which
the date? I
terrible.
didn't put it in the staff report write-up. That's why I'm curious.
I believe it was the 15th.
Of May?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And
when
the-
I
and
when I
your next
put-
one is this Saturday.
The next one is this Saturday, which happens to also be one of the brighter moon. If you're not astronomers, you don't want the moon in the sky when you're looking at the stars. And I planned the events according to my convenience schedule instead of what the moon was doing. So it makes the astronomy portion a little brighter. Nonetheless, it's exciting. We won't start that portion until about 10 p.m. So it's a very late night. Come on out. It's still going to be gorgeous. 25 participants. That's a lot of kayaks on the water at the same time. The kayaking program skipping along. Several classes were hosted, some including our own Mr. FSEF. They were well attended, and the rentals began on May 25th. You see kayak rentals here, and anytime you see kayak rentals, also here, boat launching policy enforcement. We're already really surprised at the potential recovery of income that we could be seeing with a tighter admission policy. So we're going to staff that heavily as a little bit of an experiment in kindness and helping people offset their expenses.
As
Go
a
ahead.
sidebar to that, it seems like not only are maybe people doing drive-bys on the boat launch, but they're ignoring the no dog policy. You know, I've seen a lot of dogs out there. They're usually well leashed and small, but there was incidences where I was scared.
Yeah.
And I don't know what we can do about it. Maybe we can do. I don't know if Butte County Animal Control does regular drive-bys. I don't. They're just an on-call kind of thing. So maybe we look at some sort of citation writing capabilities. I don't know.
So what we're going to start with, everything that you just said, very well heard. We're out there, especially during the middle of the week in times leading field trips when the public doesn't necessarily expect our presence. So we've got the rec staff have a pretty good thumb of what people are or aren't, the rules they are and are not following. We're going to start with presence, bright shirts, and we're going to, when I say monitor access, Dan and I have talked about, and Sarah have talked about, there's one place that we have bottleneck control of letting them in and out, and it's way out at the gate. So we're going to hire 2 staff, one to monitor the boat launch and then one at the gate, because short of actually putting an electronic gate there, that's the only way we're going to be able to cordially explain why they get the opportunity to pay for the services that they're using. So I've got a very colorful personality out there that's going to really engage them with the vibe, if you would, because if we do it wrong, it could really come back at us. So,
I think there's a couple of things. One is certainly PID had a very strong presence out there and attention. I think the combination of when their presence there decreased greatly before we picked it up. There was a little bit of a lag time there. So there was people that were utilizing the lake, got in some bad habits. I think we're trying this sort of friendly approach on, let's be persuasive. Let's change the norms out there so people are sharing that information to others. I think that presence goes a long ways, and it kind of helps explain some things too. Because look, if it's not working out with revenue and costs, and we have a lot of expenses or potential harm that could happen to people, what does that mean? Lessen access to the lake, and nobody wants to see that. And so I think this kind of friendly approach is going to go a long way for that. And then that's, we'll assess at the end of the year. I would say the only thing that we probably would like to do next year is start it early, so it sets an early season tone on it, so people know the rules and expectations, and know there's likely a presence out there. So I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's very well said. That's the one thing we're already looking at this year is just light numbers show that it's a great cost to us, not recapturing that, whatever that may be. We also, it's interesting to report it today because it'll also be on the next report, but we were part of the open house weekend and I was out at the lake. So it fits with reporting on the lake and kayaking, and one person showed up, and it was the perfect person. She was from out of town. She had bought a lot here in town, wanted to know what the recreational amenities are, said she was going to tell all her friends. She and I went on a hike halfway around the lake and back. She asked a million questions about who should her builder be? What are the best organization in town to get a hold of? She has a pet. What does she want to do with it? Like all of the questions. So I felt like this qualified representative of the Ridge for that one person. As it was their inaugural, we're expecting, more and more years as years come. But for me, it was of great value because it showed that their marketing did work and did get at least one fan from that. So that was my open house weekend. Camps are on the horizon, as well as explorative conversations with the Palladium and the Boys and Girls Club. Both of them have cooling centers, if you can call them that. So we're looking at how their services fit with ours in order to potentially take good care of our summer campers. And I went to a financial sustainability training hosted by the California Parks and Recreation Society. And it was transformative, to say the least. I heard parts of the presentation mirror things that each of our very well-informed board members have said. I have a common language now that matches a lot of what my district manager and my assistant district manager and our accountant have been talking about. But most importantly, I'm really, really proud of our profession. We're having conversations about how important financial sustainability is as public servants. And it's vulnerable and it's authentic. And people are taking a look at the bottom line and realizing there are some decisions to be made or else. And as Dan reported earlier, we're doing really well. Just from my meager recreation supervisor position. I'm excited to share some of that with everyone. And I think that we should continue offering those because it changed how I'm going to do my job forever. Lastly, the activity guide is upon us. That's right. We have to plan for the rest of the year by the end of the summer. So we're taking into account the Networking Neighborhoods grant, as well as opportunities to work with other partners. Right now, we're interested in adding a free kids disc golf tournament to the latter part of the year to balance out the free kids fishing day on the front part of the year, potentially partnering with McGill Community Park. Questions, please. Questions, thoughts, comments?
I noticed in the pictures of the pollinator garden. Can you or somebody else expand on that? And are we partnering with an entity, or is that on our own?
Some volunteers, it's on our own. It's on the peninsula out here. If you look at the work that's been done, there's a nice overbuilt, perhaps, trail there. It could withstand a small thermonuclear device. But there are, you'll see over the next few weeks, we'll put some plants in, the irrigation's getting lined up. So it's going to have a variety, kind of a lot of the same palette that we've been using out here, with native plants and demonstration, and intent is for the pollinators. So to try and get those bees, those hummingbirds,
Exactly.
those butterflies. So there's,
But you know, you're planting at exactly the wrong time of year.
yeah, that's just how it goes. But we have irrigation. So, you know, that goes a long way. Irrigation is key.
Another comment I want to say is I'm surprised it wasn't in the district report, is the new interpretive signs at Billy Park. They're excellent. In fact,
I was just going to get to that.
who knew I was on the board grabbed me and complimented the district on the quality and nature of the signs.
So I was going to mention something on that because that went in with our Trails Day. So we had this is a combination of our volunteer and Scott, if you could bring up on the screen there at least the Grotto Bridge. But our crew's been working on getting that ready. There's a nice if you go out to the grotto now, it's not quite as shady as it used to be, but there's a nice bench on the end there to contemplate the world. So it's a lovely little spot, and the staff's made it real welcoming. We just got some funding from Rotary on some of those signs. Some of those were rebuilt, but those signs were concerted effort with local artist Mary Rose Lovegren and Machupta Concow provide some guidance on some of the cultural aspects on there and some of the plant names, and they look great. So it's a nice layout. It's a pattern that we're probably going to use. Our staff's done a nice job on designing and fabricate the stands for them. Yeah, so we just need to make them a little vandal proof, and that's going to be securing the base of it. But the stickers, we use a material on there that is relatively cheap to reprint. So if it gets marked up, scarred, fades from sun 5-10 years from now, we call up the vendor and hit print. So they're pretty easy to reinstall. Thank you for that. I think they look fantastic, and we'll have some more pictures next time for them. But in either case, you should get out there and take a look. The trail needs a little bit more work to get it ready, but it's looking good out there. Thank you. Just a couple of things to mention. And like Scott mentioned earlier, the idea of some of these things happening just last month, but it seems a long time ago. We did have a partnership meeting with Patch, and it set up a little bit of a program to kind of engage on how to do that study with them and just kind of share information. Very positive meeting. We've also had a couple of meetings with Gold Nugget Museum. Very happy to report that they were able to get some help out there to help clean up the site. It's been us for the last 5 years to do that. And so it was nice to see that they were able to recruit somebody. And if you've driven out there, it still needs some work, but they have a sign up there that gives information. And it looks like it's more loved than it has been recently. Sophia has a report here on some of the work out at Crane Park. We're going to be doing on a regular basis, by the way, a volunteer effort there. So that's going to have some attention over the next few months. And I think next month, we will give a more detailed presentation, or AKA Kristen will, in August on the Neighbor to Neighbor program. But she might report next month on some of the progress that we made then. So just giving you a little heads up on that. Be happy to answer any questions, but I think that covers a lot of material in the report.
I have a minor question, Dan. Maybe you need to refresh my poor senior memory, but in relation to the Patch partnership, and you talked about that coordination meeting and so forth, in your write-up, you mentioned something about you had discussion with them to keep in mind a 2025 deadline. Can you refresh my memory? What's
Sure.
the deadline relate to?
Yeah, so we had we should keep a scorecard or like baseball cards on the stats on it. But we have a lot of partnerships going on with different organizations. The one with Patch is to take a look at the feasibility of a partnership. And so we had an MOU with them, memorandum of understanding, that will sunset in December 2025. And one of the products there is to come up with, what does it look like if we partner? What's the location? What does ownership look like? Operations? How do we interact with the nonprofit and so forth? So from a special district standpoint, how do we engage with them if something's going to move forward? So that's kind of the idea with that breadcrumb in there, that we're on the hook for a report on that.
Thank you for sharing that. That helps me, because just last night I attended a town council meeting, and I'm pleased to say that Patch did an eloquent presentation before the town council on the concept of, this joint campus, as you will, with all these different players. And that was well received, I believe. And also in that presentation fits nicely with the deadline that you referred to. They're already well underway. When I say Patch, it's their 2 part-time staff people, but they're well underway with soliciting interest from feasibility consultant firms throughout the nation, possibly do this study. So we'll see how that plays out, but hopefully they can find somebody and secure some funding for that and get that underway, so that can be done in a timely manner.
Good news. I think another approach I appreciate what they've done is looking at from a business plan standpoint. And so the long-term sustainability, financial sustainability of it. Just to be clear on the feasibility studies, there's kind of 2 pathways. One is if we had, funding and a third party that's going to do it. The other alternative, it's kind of more of a homegrown one that may be less detail, less of the data, but kind of gives a little bit of direction, and maybe kind of a half step in back of what could be a full-on feasibility study. So it's encouraging that they're trying to pursue that.
That brings us to the board liaison report. Was there any public comment on the district report? No. Okay, now we're at board liaison.
I got nothing.
I mean, it's the same thing then, if you guys are not going to share anything. Well, since our last board meeting on May the 8th, and some of my fellow board members should have indicated this, we attended the annual conference of CARPD, which is California Association of Rec and Park Districts. Happy to say, May 22nd through the 24th. It was a well-run conference, I believe, and some of our staff was there as well. While I was there, I attended a CARPD board meeting, which occurred on May 22nd. The essence of that board meeting was basically wrapping up the tail end of the current fiscal year, but at the same time coming up with a budget for next fiscal year, which is then subsequently presented to all the district attendees at the conference to vote on, which was passed. Also on June the 5th, I attended via Zoom another CARPD board meeting. Highlights of that meeting via Zoom was we received a conference review. It turns out the conference was quite successful. We did not go into debt. And the feedback we got from many of the attendees that filled out the survey was very positive. So that was good news. At the same time, the board, through the new president, appointed various board members their committee assignments for the new fiscal year. And last but not least, we adopted a board and committee schedule for the new fiscal year. On June the 6th, which was last Thursday, I attended the monthly Butte LAFCO meeting. Highlights of that agenda was primarily we accepted our fiscal year 20, you're going to like hearing this, fiscal year 2022-2023 auditors report for Butte LAFCO. And we adopted an update to LAFCO service fees to reflect the employment cost index. Last but not least, we heard an annexation proposal and approved it for annexing a state-owned acreage of land to the Thermalito Water and Sewer District, which is their service areas takes in the Oroville Airport area, if any of you people know where that location is. Last but not least, I was really pleased to attend the Honey Run Covered Bridge Association's annual June 2nd annual pancake breakfast in the Butte Creek Canyon. It was well attended. I think and I really appreciated being there. I was able to interact with a lot of the local citizens there, and that felt really good. They are really making some great progress on the Honey Run Covered Bridge. In fact, it was explained to me that 2 days after that pancake breakfast, that park area would be cordoned off to the public because the construction materials are on their way to be delivered and stored there, and soon the contractor crews will be underway with phase 2 on the bridge, which is basically the span going across the support structures. So that's very exciting. And last but not least, I was honored, and of course it was costly, but I participated in the 4th annual Honey Run Covered Bridge Association's fundraiser golf tournament up at Bailey Creek on June the 8th.
Yeah. Did you win the tournament?
Suffice it to say, I just survived.
I do want to add too that the district received our award from Capri over the PRPD meeting, our safety award. So congratulations to everybody.
And that brings us to board comment. Mal?
We're ending the meeting and the sun's still up.
Yeah. I did go to the concert that Pat's put down in at Monca. I didn't know what Monca meant until I went to that concert. And I did the volunteer Scottsboro pull at Crane Park. It was warm. That's about it for me. So with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting to the next regular meeting of July 10th, 2024 at 6 p.m. right here. Thank you.